I'm going to call to order the meeting, the workshop meeting of the town of Rochester. Planning board, if we could all stand for the pledge. The pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, Jasmine, could you, what we're gonna do, Jasmine's going to do the roll call. And if you would, each person, we have 4 new people here, if you would introduce yourself in addition to saying, "Hi, I'm here," just introduce yourself very briefly and what your background is. So. Okay. We'll have a break for a minute.
How are you, dude? We still do, but we have new members that don't have them, so
Oh, so that's why we,
I don't know
Yeah.
why, but
okay,
you don't want to leave anybody else.
I got it.
We were just saying that Dave Church's review is very helpful and much appreciated.
We
Agreed.
we really never had that kind of detailed review before. It was very difficult.
It's great.
So it's really helpful. Put a little professionalism to the
Yeah,
process.
so it's good for us, good for the development.
Not sure what she's looking for, but
Hopefully she'll.
can't start without the administrative assistant. I think it's the roll call list.
Oh,
Sorry. Everybody home for Thanksgiving?
no,
Traveling?
just to Westchester with the turkey.
So while we're waiting for it, let me just explain to everybody what we're gonna do tonight. And then we'll do the roll call. This is a workshop meeting. We typically, the old board, I'll refer to the old and the new. The old board used to skip the workshop meetings for one reason or another. And try to squeeze everything into the regular meeting. Thus, meetings would last till 11:30, sometimes 11 o'clock. So I'm starting the workshop meetings to try to take some of the very large projects and go through the details of those projects in a separate meeting. Typically, what we do with the workshop meeting is not have, well, we don't have public comment, and we typically don't have the applicant get intimately involved. However, since there are 4 new people here, I'm going to ask the applicant, we'll engage the applicant, which normally when we do have workshop meetings, it's just a board meeting coming up with what we believe we should do with the project, how we should handle it with the applicant here. And it's, kind of awkward sometimes. The applicant has some questions, fine. But I think we'll engage because we have new people here. Did you find what you're looking for?
It will not print.
It will not print. All right, so you want to do the roll call?
I don't know everyone's name off the top. of
Okay,
my
so Hans Fischer on,
Hans Fitzgerald.
he's here. Do you
I'm
want to
here.
tell us your background a little
Sure.
bit?
I'm originally from Switzerland. I came in 2003 to town with my wife, Roxanne. Locally, I'm serving on the board of the Royal Land Conservancy with Peter. I'm also a co-owner of Robcat Brewing in Kongsen. And last but not least, I've been on the zoning board of appeals since the beginning of this year. So I graduated to this great team. Yes, I'm very excited. In my day job, I'm a management consultant. I will run a risk and compliance practice for a large consulting firm. And we also do a lot of cyber risk advisory.
Thank you. Peter?
I'm on the fire department. I'm getting a call right now.
Shall we skip you?
No.
Yeah.
I'll come back to you.
That's all right.
You good? Okay.
Peter Nelson, been here since 1988. Also on the board of the Romulus Hopus Land Conservancy and heavily involved with the Airport Fire, the chief. And been on the planning board since earlier this year.
Good. Helena?
Helena Duda, geologist, formerly the minerals manager for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Region 3. Been a longtime resident, I don't know, at least 30, 40 years. And that's about it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Farmold. I've been living in the town of Rochester since 2016. I currently work for the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, and I have a background in urban planning, environmental permitting, environmental analysis, capital planning, etc.
Great. David?
Dave Roberts, I have been in the Hudson Valley for almost 30 years. Became a US citizen last year. I'm an architect by training and have worked both locally and in New York City on commercial and residential projects. I'm currently the capital projects manager for Woodland Pond. We're heading up $140 million expansion there, which will be over the next 6-7 years.
Thank you. Dave Church?
I'm the town planning consultant for a year, a little more.
About a year.
I retired as the Orange County Park Planning Commissioner. Had various functions before that as a consultant. I'm a trained geologist and planner. Live in Shawangum, where I've been for town of Shawangum, Little Cragsmore for 38 years.
Dave Gordon?
Dave Gordon, I'm the attorney for this merry brunch. Do my best to keep everybody on track, and hopefully it'll work.
This band of brothers, right?
Hello, my name is Robin Quick. I am the assistant assessor to the town of Olive. I'm also on their building department as well. I've been a long-time resident to this lovely area, and I'm excited to see the changes that we're all bringing to the wonderful area.
And I'm Rick Jones. I've been here in the area since 2015, on the planning board since 2018. I spent 41 years in jail for JP Morgan Chase. When I got out of jail, I went back to school for botany and horticulture, and my real joy is giving tours down at the New York Botanical Gardens and teaching a little bit down there. Doing this and just being a rockin' tour of one sort or another. So we'll get started. So I'm gonna, first project, if you guys want to sit here, you sit there, whatever you want, is Meadow Lakes. As Dave will explain, we've been treating it as an 8-lot subdivision. It actually is a 10-lot subdivision. We'll explain why. And there's a number of, we've had you guys in front of us, I guess, twice, or at least once, maybe twice.
I think just once.
Just once, okay. And bit of a delay for one reason or another with the change in planning board between meetings canceled, new chair, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But tonight, I think, I believe I sent Matt you the Dave's summary, didn't I?
Yep.
Okay, so you got a good idea as to what some of the challenges are going to be for you guys. And added to that, and I don't have too much to talk about in regards to it, but the town board just instituted some new zoning changes to both the zoning code as well as the subdivision code. And Dave is starting to go through it. I've gone through it slightly. So there will be some changes to many of the projects that we have in front of us with the new town code. And when we're at a point in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to we're going to sit with each project that's impacted, go through the impacts, and then get you back into the public meetings to go through the project. Some projects will have no impact, some have some significant impacts. So I think the biggest impacts for this project is it does have, particularly with the new code, it does have prime agricultural soils, which allows it to be refocled as potentially as a conservation subdivision. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we're in a better position to do that. But I think the overarching impression I get from Dave's work is, one, and it'll be belong to too many houses on the property, spreading over a large piece of land that was farmland at one time. In our code, in certain sections of our code now, the applicants are urged to both preserve the stone fences to the extent that's significant, and or to preserve the open space as open space and to move the homes more to the outside of the lots as opposed to having them sitting right in the middle of the lots. And the other significant thing, which is probably new, is the treatment of shared driveways and the permissibility or not of shared driveways. And you have a number of shared driveways, Matt, that you've drawn on your project. So what Dave has done, and I'm gonna have him not go through a lot of the pro forma stuff, Dave, in terms of documents we received or any of that, but go right to the heart of it, in terms of what you observed. And then I think it's primarily the board that needs to share their thoughts about it and what they've observed in the maps. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to look at Dave's information as well as to look at the maps in detail. In front of you, you do have the latest map for Meta. So feel free to spread it out or not. Share it with your neighbor. Robin, I have no problem if you want to for just posing up at the end there so you can see it.
On down.
Either use that chair or one of the chairs from the audience. For the express purpose of just knowing and being knowledgeable of each project, you won't be able to make commentary. The alternates here in the town of Rochester are not allowed to make commentary or vote on the project, but are expected to be fully aware of the bits and pieces. So we'll talk about how we can help with that down the road. Dave, you want to get started?
Okay, so the highlights. So because of the two common areas are proposed. Everybody all right?
Yep. Yeah.
So interesting to see people look at paper maps. So it's an 8-lot subdivision, but the layout proposes 2 common lots. So it's you have to create the lots, so it's technically a 10-lot subdivision, which is not anything meaningfully procedurally different.
Yeah, just a comment on that. The other alternative is that the 2 common lots get attached to one of the other lots, and there's still 8 lots. But you're unlikely to want to make common lots part of somebody else's lots, so you
Yeah,
have to.
it's still a major subdivision, so 8 or 10, it doesn't make, and you've got some improvements, so it's really procedurally much to do about nothing. However, you can't create a lot in New York State without it being buildable. And that's, I'm shorthanding on the references in the town code, so you're gonna have to provide some evidence that you could actually put a full use on those common areas. I don't know, sometimes communities ask them just to prove they can put a well and septic on it somewhere and get proper separation. They're good sized lots, so it's not a big deal, but
And the board has to make a waiver, right?
not necessarily.
Okay.
Well, we can get to that, but
Okay.
but the common areas are conservation minded, so I'll just emphasize they're a good idea in concept. It's just a matter of layout and making sure they're properly established. It's essentially your sketch phase. It's major subdivision. Let's go sketch, preliminary, final. Your code has procedural requirements and standards for sketches and preliminary. Final subdivision plats are supposed to conform substantively with the preliminary you approve. So you're just going through the public hearing, a closing seeker, those kinds of things. So you're at the sketch phase. The code says you have to schedule a site inspection for major subdivisions. You have to determine if the site is within the ag district, which it's not. Ulster County Agricultural District, which you can look at maps. And then there's a series of there's some opportunities for lot design modification or acreage discussions that are set in the standards, which are to be determined at sketch phase. But that's complicated now by the new code, and I don't know how deep we'll get into that, but county referral isn't required. It's a large enough subdivision to send to the county planning board for comment, but it's not within 500 feet of any feature that triggers that referral. There's no county road, state road, parkland. It's not adjacent to an ag district or a municipal border. So it's not referable to the county. Seeker, they filled out a short environmental assessment form. I'm recommending you get a full environmental assessment form, part 1. Footnote, the new code requires that. Okay, so you might as well just assume, Matt, you got to do a full form, part 1. It's in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District, this property, which has current standards, and those standards are much elaborated in the new code. So we're going to have to talk about that under the assumption it's about to take effect, the new code.
I think the biggest thing, and I could be mixing up old code, new code, but there was also a change made to when you need a hydrological study.
Correct.
And I forget what it used to be. Now it's 2,000 gallons of usage per day, or in a given day during a 30-day period, which this project.
Water or septic.
Right. And this project probably qualifies for that. And Matt, a full hydrological study has to indicate, is there going to be drawdown on other wells, whether they're multiple wells you drill here, or there's wells, participant wells or neighbor wells that you ask permission to monitor, and you draw enough water that you would normally use during a day with all these homes there, and you have to show that there's no impact, that the well recovers, that there's no significant drawdown. Now, this is known as in spite of the fact that it has an aquifer protection zone, this is known as a tough area when it comes to water. I know 2 people here whose wells during the last 2 months of drought have gone dry. And it's happened before. So I'll leave that comment until we explore more the new code, but that is going to be something I believe you're going to have to do.
So while it's not in a county agricultural district, which is specific parcels are listed by the county and approved by the state to be in an agricultural district, it does have soils of statewide importance and some prime farmland soils, which in the current code that this board has to consider whether a layout could be improved by and help protect those. Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, the new code has specific standards for dealing with prime soils that are going to have to be dealt with. Let's see here. The common areas I just noted, great idea, but we're going to need more about some more. In fact, I think the memo sent to the applicant asked for some rendering about the barn and other issues. So the board's going to need to know more about what's going to actually happen at the common areas. What's the ownership arrangement are going to be, and whether it's, some of the layout design there will have to be tweaked somehow. I did recommend a conservation design option for this. We can talk more about why. It's currently an option the board can exercise. My quick read of the new code is you can require it.
Because of the prime soils?
It's a major subdivision too.
Okay.
So while I didn't comment on the too many lots or not enough lots, or I didn't, the challenge, I guess, is the access layout. The combination of 2 cul-de-sac roads, one flag lot, maybe, I'm trying to remember exactly. Some shared driveways, and the common area 2 is described as an existing gravel road to be used as a walking path for homeowners access. So I have noted that's got to be treated as a real lot, so it's got to meet frontage and access requirements. So my recommendation is we need to talk through the current layout related to the access issues. The dead end roads, the shared drives, the flag lot and other access. Which in a couple of cases do punch through stone walls too, but it's almost avoidable on this property. And whether it would benefit from doing a conservation design option, which I'm gonna presume you can now require if you so choose, or it could be offered by the applicant. And then, let's see here, you need to do some, the detailed sheets, we might want to wait a little bit till we get, till if the layout's gonna be redesigned, that will affect these. But the grading of utilities and erosion control map sheets and the stormwater pollution prevention plan will need to be reviewed by the town engineer. You requested, Jasmine, you sent them a memo in late August. I think you've gotten everything requested except the proposed, the quote unquote plan for the pool and renderings for the proposed barn are still pending. That I didn't see. That's kind of it. I could know two things. For me, it's anonymous, but the chairman's gotten a memo from an anonymous source that says that 20 years ago or somewhere about, a bunch of buildings got torn down and buried on site. And there may have been action related to that, either from DEC or the code enforcement officer. I looked up the DEC database. I couldn't find any reference to this property on anything, frankly.
There's,
But so I don't know, but that needs to be addressed probably. And then ultimately, a discussion, Chairman, we gotta have at some point. The new code brings into this current layout won't work with the new code. An example, the code, one of the standards says that you can't have shared driveways off of cul-de-sacs. For example. So you can't do that anymore. And once this new code takes effect, which could have happened this afternoon for all we know. Because it's just a filing date requirement. It's likely to happen if it hasn't happened already any day now. And I've got a list of things in the preliminary review that are issues associated with the new code and the current layout. I will note that you can expect with the new code, if you have exterior lighting proposed anywhere, you're gonna have to submit a lighting plan to the board. There are 3 new notes that'll have to go on the subdivision plat, according to the code, that are non-negotiable. And there's and this property's relatively level. So that it's not affected, but there's some whole new general and specific subdivision design standards on how you count the lot area and what you subtract from it now. So we're gonna have to do some calculation. The most specific one with the new code related to this project is someone's gonna have to do an aerial measurement of the prime farmland soil and see how that conforms with the new dimensional requirements of the code, because they are not to be, a certain percent of them can't be counted towards the lot size.
okay. So it's as if, so the prime soils is similar to if you had slopes of 50 degrees, you can't
Correct,
count those slopes
correct,
for purposes of coming up with how many lots you can get.
correct.
And to use it for that, okay. There's a copy for the applicant. There's more copies of this letter that we received as a public comment, right over there in the corner of the table, about the claim that 15 years ago or so, there was some debris buried here. And I'll let you read through it. We're gonna need, I think what I'd like to see happen there is Dave and Helena to do some research to see, it's claimed that it was on whatever the DEC had in terms of a list. It disappeared from the list. So I don't know if that means it was cleaned up or it's not cleaned up or just disappeared.
I did reach out to the regional engineer today in regards to that site.
Okay.
And because it is 2002, That was before the agency computerized a lot of our information. So he is going to look.
There's purportedly a videotape that was taken at the time of the burial,
Right.
a videotape of the fuel tanks, the.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
debris,
surprised that it occurred, you know,
If we identify that it did occur, well, it did occur, they have a videotape of it.
so,
So if it is, I think if I'm correct, you have to go through a phase one. And then to find the documentation about exactly where it was, there's an indication of where it all happened. And then there's gonna have to be drilling done, sampling done to determine, is it still there? To what extent is it there? Did it pollute any of the groundwater or the ground itself? So there's I don't deign to know too much about the process, but I would like Dave and Helena, without too much more tonight, to start looking into it and finding out. And the fellow who wrote this to us gave his identification
Oh, yeah.
info here, so.
Yeah, databases I looked at, if there's an active investigation or I don't know what you would call it generically, counselor, action in front of DEC, there's nothing listed.
Okay.
Eric, it's an inactive plan.
It's,
so-
yeah, I will note the dam at Fermetta Lake is classified by the state as a low hazard. And there's no issues associated with it that are in DEC databases.
Okay. So I'm gonna, thanks, Dave. So that was a good summary. Open to the board. Comments, questions?
Do we know where this work supposedly happened? Would that be up where the existing pool was?
I don't know, and I'm gonna leave it for Helena and Dave to get in touch with this guy who says he knows where it is and find it on the map, or locate it on the map, so that we all know. It sounded like it's to the right of the main road that comes in. That doesn't tell me much. Just to the right on a parcel of this size.
I believe also Marion Hop fired, right?
Oh, God, yes.
She fell around it, right?
I think so. I haven't heard otherwise.
Peter, anything else?
Yeah, Dave, just a clarification, the common area B is the one you're talking about, that would have to be made into an accessible road, right, down to the one that's on the bottom, down by the pond.
It's going to have 50 feet of frontage on a public or private road. And I'm not an expert in the new code, but it's going to have to, depending on what the ultimate layout is, could actually initially proposed to be it share the drive with ultimately with I forgot the lot numbers on the north end.
Yeah.
But you can't have shared drives off cul-de-sacs without a waiver from this board that meets certain standards. I should say that a lot of the new standards, there is a waiver provision by the planning board, but it's much more clear about under what circumstances you can grant a waiver. You just can't grant it because you feel like it. It has to, you have to gain certain public interests that are articulated in the new code.
Okay.
So Peter, is going to be an issue there about the ultimate layout, but you can't create a lot. Can't create any lot without it meeting the minimal dimensional requirements.
Okay, and then I had a question about, we know, again, I think I asked this the first time that the applicant was here, was the source of water for the pond. Where does that come from? And what's that pond?
It doesn't seem to be, I don't know, I didn't investigate it far. I mean, Helena and I could look and it's right next to the creek, so it must be hydrologically connected, but it's
above.
but it may be groundwater. I had assumed it was originally, because there's been at least sand and gravel mining in that whole area. That it's a big hole somebody dug for sand and gravel and it filled up with water.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. So spring fed. Perched water, I don't know the geology there well enough to know if there's something buried underneath.
If anybody from the
making water.
public has any information about that, write us instead of discussing it here, because we haven't looked at, just write us a letter, let us if you have any understanding of where it came from. It's there, just wondering where it came from. We did talk about, Dave, at some point in time. The topo was very acute when you get down towards the lake. And some of this could just be runoff, natural runoff.
Fair enough.
All right, so, but. Anybody else from the board? How about this side?
Go ahead.
So I'll reserve some of my comments because I understand that there's new code and I don't want to muck this up if it's gonna be changing anyway. One comment that I had, and it's relevant for the existing, but it could also be relevant for the future design, is there are septic systems. I'm guessing it's a little over 100 feet from the pond, but it might be useful to move those a little bit further away because, this is also predicated on the site visit. We have one scheduled. I haven't been out to the site yet. But, so I'd like to take a look at this pond, but there's the potential for nutrients and you can end up with like algal blooms and the water just gets really gross. So, it might be a good idea to try and keep the septics a little bit further away from that, especially since it's down slope. I feel like
The septics are, they're all over 100 feet. They're required.
yes, I understand that, but I don't know that really matters given the site. It's worth mentioning because you have what could be just a standing body of water. Again, I haven't been out there, so seeing the site makes all the difference. But that's something to think about. And particularly if there are lawns, I also don't know what the plan is for this after construction. So if you have lawns, people might be putting fertilizer, that's gonna run off into the pond. And it'll just, the water quality won't last in that situation. Another comment that I had, and I guess it'll depend on what we end up with like entries onto the parcel, but we may want to look at the traffic because we have Arrowwood and West Winder right there. And pretty much everyone from those sites comes out this way. So I'm not going to presume to tell people what to do with traffic, but it may be worthwhile to think about that piece of this and what that would mean for people exiting. Now you have more people coming out.
Dave, how do we handle traffic on that?
Well, you
Just
can
get the
do,
traffic counts from the applicant? Or,
well, yes, there's a institute, that publishes based on known data. You can plug in, short of getting software to do this. You can through certain published sources, you can get what they call trip generation, which means you can query the land use type and how many units, if it's residential or square footage, the kinds of use. And it'll tell you how many vehicles movements to expect at peak times, which is typically separated by AM morning or PM peak.
so
You
I guess
can, with more sophisticated access, like the traffic engineer we met with a week ago
right.
for a different applicant, they can run computer models
So I
and
guess we
even
can
look at like Saturday morning and.
We can get the data, then so there's gonna be more traffic. I don't know what we do with it then. I'm not,
Well,
would it be, it's part of secret.
Get an engineer who knows how to do it. You don't have to invent the wheel. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to make that mistake.
and
Get a smart person to figure out how to do it.
the trip counts, as it's called, contribute to the level of service at intersections. And level of service is measured in the A through F rating. Just like schoolwork, A's good, F is bad.
But Dave is referring to your typical seeker review of traffic situations results in, it's an assessment of congestion and how much the congestion is going to get worse. The congestion levels are rated, actually wait times at particular intersections for a particular project. You choose a certain set of intersections that are of concern, certain set of motions, and the wait time is rated A through F. And the goal of the seeker review is to determine if you're going to change some of those categories. Like if you're going to go from B to C or B to D, that becomes an issue.
Well, and the thing that I'm also thinking about is things like site distance and safety, because you're gonna have people coming in from different directions in addition, so it'll depend on what happens with the driveways. given the feedback you've gotten here, so it's something to think about. And if I understand correctly, the current design does not include parking for the common area, so it's not intended to offer off-site, like a singular location for off-site traffic per se, though people can park at other people's houses and travel to the common area. So I don't know if the common area has an occupancy, if we have that information. But depending on what the occupancy is, then that could also be relevant for traffic analysis. So if the occupancy is equal to the occupancy of the houses, well, then it's
Yeah.
1-to-1, but.
Yeah, we haven't talked much about that pool area, but let me go to the traffic. We're gonna need you guys to come up with traffic numbers for our engineer to look at, so you can do the study. Or we'll do it, but we need some traffic generation numbers, the impact on site distance, the impact on the existing traffic. And then our engineer, you do the study. And then our engineer is gonna go through it and see what what it looks like compared to what is, tell us what it's gonna be. And we haven't talked too much about that common area, but yeah, there is nothing here in terms of parking. Was it intended to have parking here for people coming to the pool?
There are 2 parking spaces.
There are a couple parking spaces.
Just 2 parking spaces?
People walk there. This is not a public amenity. It's just people walk there from their houses.
It's just for the people on site.
It's just for people on site. It's just
People
so,
on site.
yeah, so
Okay.
you don't need.
But yeah, there's 2 parking spaces at the end of this turnaround.
What map is
For
that? Which,
maintenance vehicle. It's on the first sheet. In the middle. Pointing.
Right, so my comment to that would be if.
I see a tennis court, I see,
Look at the notes pointing. Turnaround, proposed parking area for maintenance vehicles.
oh, there it is. Okay.
So
So-
it's just 2 spots.
My comment is more relevant to occupancy also, so I'm gonna make up some numbers to give an example. If the site can host a 300-person wedding. Even if there's like, I'm making this up for an example, but if the occupancy is significantly higher than what you would expect at the homes, then that's relevant information for us to understand. I don't think we have information on that facility, so that's something to consider if it's materially different. If the numbers are materially different between what you would expect at the homes versus that site.
So I think Jennifer brings up a really good point that, I mean, aside from with the new code, these roadways are gonna have to change. The houses are gonna need to be moved out of the prime soil areas, a whole host of things, but aside from that. We sort of danced around the common areas, both common areas. How are you gonna access it? Is it all walking? You need a narrative to tell us what you're doing, who has access to it, how are they getting there? And we'll make that part of the conditions, are you gonna have events in any of these common areas? We need to know that, need to know what noise is gonna be generated potentially as a result of those events. If no events, then that's gonna be part of the of our conditions, no events. Except those which are shared by the 5, 6, 7 homes that are here, but nothing else that would generate, because we also outlawed commercial events of any sort. Now, this wouldn't be a commercial event, but there's no more commercial events allowed in the town in any zone. So, there's a real direction that we're going in to not to disturb the neighbors. Everybody enjoy themselves, but not to create a scene, if you would. So this board needs a lot more information about the use of these common areas, the occupancy of the common areas, how people are going to get to it. And whatever you tell us, we're going to make as a condition, which then the building department is responsible for making sure. Well, first, is it reasonable what you're telling us? And then it's the building department that will have the responsibility of making sure that that's what's carried out over the life of the project. Jennifer, go ahead, Dave.
I was just gonna say, I expect that use for that common area, the barn and so on would be covered in your HOA. As well, right?
That's true.
And so that will give us an indication about, the extent of use. Because it's not unusual or wouldn't be out of line to think, one of these people is gonna have a wedding of 150 people. And that's a different deal.
So I'm gonna ask, we have the HOA, I'm gonna ask Dave Gordon to take a look at the HOA. Or do you want to wait a while until we figure out?
I'm happy to start looking at it, but as Dave said, this is gonna have to be redesigned, so.
Okay.
I mean, the
We'll
HOA
wait.
may-
rather than run up some bills.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, the-
by the way, there's a whole new section about through a conservation design option. The conservation lands, there's some completely different rules now. HOAs are the choice of last resort, basically, at this point. That's not to say that, it's gotta have a conservation purpose, is the way I read it through, which may not, yours are more recreation purpose, right?
and that's what-
Even though they result in conservation lands, I'd caution you that, you're gonna have to look at the ownership arrangement of any conservation lands from now on differently than you have.
Okay,
I have,
Yeah,
my last
Jennifer?
comment is just that with what we've just said about lots, frontage, et cetera, notwithstanding. I really liked that the pond and the wetlands are largely contained on one lot. If there's a way, I think, when I was looking at the plan, it looks like there were some wetlands that were on adjacent parcels. If there's a way in the revision to keep all of that on one parcel for protection, that would be fantastic. Will be appreciated for me. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump back over here.
Since we're talking about the ponds, I'll just, common area B, are you going to be disturbing any trees here? It's adjacent.
No, there's absolutely no disturbance.
Okay, because one of the things that I'm very concerned about would be any tree cut, I mean, it's a class A stream, any tree cutting in that corridor. And then also the distance, this pond apparently has been, I'm looking at an aerial from 1995. This pond has been there for a long time. But you don't even have 100 feet from the Rochester Creek. I mean, it seems like you've got, the pond is about 15 feet above when I looked at your contours. But I see that as a
So Helena,
potential problem.
yeah, explain that to me. I'm not following you on that.
No, I was just saying, well, streams tend to cut. Okay, and so you don't want to have capture. Here he has 15 feet of elevation, but you don't want to have any tree cutting along within a 100-foot buffer of a class A stream.
Oh,
Because
so you're worried about the
right,
stream cutting?
and he just answered that they are not planning on cutting anything, but what you might want to think about, and you know, we should check out this area. But you might be able to get trees for tribs and do some tree plantings if this area between the ponds is unstable.
So Matt, you're saying they're not gonna do any clear cutting. The letter that I shared with you indicates that there has been some tree clear cutting.
Maybe before,
We didn't.
but
cut
I
any
mean, these are prior owners, you know, it's nothing.
All right. All right, so we'll see when we do the site visit. You may need some,
I drive by there all the time
okay,
and I've seen some tree cutting.
You've seen some
before,
tree
but that's a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think you purchased the property in 2024, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
that was
So-
clearly before, yeah.
yeah.
But I saw it and that was quite extensive actually.
The other thing is, again, I'm looking at, you know, Google Earth Pro. And you can see where the buildings were, and I don't know, but it might behoove you to do a phase 1, phase 2 environmental assessment. And kind of focus in where those buildings were, and we'll, you know, Dave and I will also look into it. To see if we can get any more a definitive location. Who knows, if you walk it, you might even be able to detect it, I'm not sure. Any prior disturbances, but. Yeah.
Where is it roughly? Do we know?
we don't know.
We don't,
Except-
we have no
Well,
idea.
if you'll,
Just what the letter says,
yeah, but you can see, if you go to Google Earth Pro, you can see.
There's
where
a little bit of a
where the
disturbance
buildings
there.
were.
yeah.
So,
Oh,
and again, I'm looking into that, and then other than that, I do agree with all of the comments that Dave Church provided.
Okay, Hans, you have anything else?
I support Jennifer's comments about the traffic. It's a very tight curve there on a very small road, which doesn't have a lot of visibility. So I think that needs to be addressed also.
Okay. Do we have a site visit? And we've tried. Do we have a date
Yeah, I think it's
It's
Monday.
scheduled, yeah.
this coming Monday? The day after, Monday, the first or second?
Second, yeah.
Yes.
And did we plan on,
Do an 8 a.m.
and, all of
We're
us,
all going.
we're all going. So let me get this, December 2nd at 8 AM, okay.
Well, you were all going, I don't.
Yeah, we're all gonna go.
Yeah,
We're all gonna go. Bring your own coffee at 8 AM in the morning. All right, so I think, Dave,
Excuse me,
anything
where are
else?
we meeting? Are we gonna be meeting at the site?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I'm sorry.
No, do you have anything else to add?
Well, just note on the site distance. This board and your peers would typically defer that to the manager of the road, which in this case is the highway superintendent. But in some cases, it could be county DPW or New York State DOT, but that's their job, is to confirm that site distance is suitable or not, and we haven't, this hasn't been referred yet.
So I agree with you. My concern is, I can look at a road and say, it looks good. And that's just, putting my finger up.
Right.
I'd rather have the traffic engineer, there are standards for roads like this in terms of feet, elevation, the whole 9 yards. I'd rather get something that's done by an engineer, unless the highway department's going out with a survey tool to actually survey it. So I hear you, but I want something a little bit more technical.
Okay, second, I'm just noting for.
Of course, this is a skinny road.
For everybody's purpose, including the applicant, it's the Institute of Traffic Engineers publishes traffic data on different kinds of land uses and at different scales and different locations. So you can get this trip generation and what its impacts from their publications, which are all online now. And you can source those from other places. Rutgers used to put out a lot of data. Mr. Gordon and I just conferred, if anticipate this will be a type 1 action,
Because of,
the new code.
okay,
It's in the Aquifer Overlay District, and certain actions trick the you can explain more what a town can do to make things type 1, but
A lot of secret procedures, they're all, of course, governed by the DEC regulations, but towns and all other agencies have the ability to have their own seeker procedures and codes. And one thing that is common, but it's not that common that a town or a local government or an agency would have their own secret code, but when they do, one of the most common things is their own type 1 and type 2 list. And the new law that Dave pulled up on his laptop appears to show that the town is enacting certain type 1 criteria. And in particular, in the Aquifer Overlay District, if the action is going to use more than 2,000 gallons of water a day, in or out, apparently, it's type 1 action. So what that means is type 1 action is an elevated seeker review in some ways. I mean, ultimately, both type 1 and unlisted result in a declaration of significance, and so a neg deck or a pos deck, and that's really all that is the goal of all of our seeker reviews. But if it's type 1, we have to, we first of all, they have to do a loan form, so we're going to be looking at a loan form, we're going to be looking at the part 2, but also the whole idea of, what's the traffic impact? Do I have to put my thumb in the air, or do I? Your engineers will figure that out, and including issues relating to site safety, et cetera. The board can contribute its own knowledge, but if you have a question about something, we're going to need some. If it's not something that it's not like a visual thing, it's not like, scenery and things like that. You'll need an expert to tell you about the site distances, about if the slope of the road is appropriate, if the width of the road is appropriate, if what's happening to the water, anything relating to the to the environmental impact, particularly on a technical basis. So it's probably gonna be type 1 action once the code goes into effect. There will be reasons to redesign this because of, the conservation issues. So we're gonna look at probably a whole new lot layout, and approach it on that basis.
so Matt, what Dave and I have chatted about how we're going to get to applicants about the zoning changes. So after Thanksgiving, that first week of December, I think that'd be the week to get together with Dave, myself, and 1 or 2 members of the board for education purposes. We'll spread it across all the projects, but to sit with you and go through the implications of the new code to your project, you can anticipate this whole thing is gonna be redone significantly, whatever that means, because of the code. So there are some things that we can begin to work on right now. We'll send you a letter with what I heard tonight from the board, what decisions were made tonight in terms of what has to be done. I'll send you that letter the next day or two. It'll come from Jasmine. Dave and I will compile it, but then very soon thereafter, we need to set some time to sit down and go through this, so you know where the changes are and you get some direction in terms of what the next steps are.
I would also point out, there's been a lot of turnover on the board, but for any of you who were around, earlier this year, or maybe late last year, in the Jaeger subdivision, that was also, it was conservation subdivision, I believe it was a type 1 action, and it was similar in size and scale to this. That was at, I think, 13 lots, which ultimately came down to 10. This is starting out at 8. So it's basically, and for those of you, including in the community, that remember the level of review, the level of, how we looked at that, you can expect a similar sort of thing. So it's going to be a substantial seeker review. It'll take a number of meetings and consultation, but that's the scale that we're looking at here.
So it would be good to read the current conservation subdivision, because some of what's in the current has been carried over, plus there's new stuff. But one of the key things with a conservation easement or conservation subdivision is you can vary the lot size. So instead of, what is this, 5 acre or 3 acre?
Yes.
5. So you can go down, I forget what percentage, but let's say down to 2, 1.5 acres for the homes, in order to push them away from some of the, presumably, the valuable soils in this area. So there's a lot of that can be done. You don't necessarily get a bonus, although that might be part of the new code too. You don't get to build more, you get to build the same or a little less, but you get to do it on smaller lots so that you can redesign the drives and the private roads and the shared driveways and all that to comply with the code. So just a suggestion.
Hey, Rick, I'm trying to understand what the purpose of it is. So when you say push it away from the soils, do you have to figure out which soils are good and which soils are not good and put the house on the not good soils? Or
Well,
I'm gonna let
that-
Dave answer that. Both Daves.
Well, I can't, as an example, let's see here. I'm just getting into this. The new code says no more than 40% of a proposed lot may have land containing prime farmland soils.
So, yeah, but that's, when you get into a conservation subdivision, you're looking at whatever the environmental value is. So in this case, you may have prime farmland soils that you're going to want to try to avoid. But also, as some of the members are saying, you're going to have a combination at the other end of proximity to the pond, as well as prime forestry land, as well as what I just heard, and I don't know any of this myself, but there are some steep slopes that kind of go down to the pond and have forest on.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that, I mean, we don't know yet where what the value of the habitat, but just literally the lay of the land at that point, that's going to be something
Right.
you're going to tend to avoid.
I know, but the point is that I thought we were already doing that, and so I'm trying to understand what we got wrong about.
Well,
that.
you
Because we
didn't-
already put the,
Well, you're gonna,
You're spread over the site.
You spread too far over the site.
so you want the houses need to be all next to each other?
That's why you have.
no, you've got, if I may, you've got access through this combination of dead end private roads, shared drives, a flag lot, and miscellaneous other things. They're confusing to those of us that have looked at them. I'm not convinced they currently meet the code, and they definitely don't meet the new code. So you have a whole new layout to do.
But
With conservation design subdivision, you can do more than change the lot size. You can change any dimensional requirement of a lot. If it meets conservation purposes, which in the new code are much more strictly spelled out.
I just want to, I want to emphasize sort of the most basic mechanism at play in a conservation subdivision, which is that by having smaller lots, which are allowed and encouraged in a situation like this, you cluster them typically. And so you put them in a relatively small area of the lot, which allows you to preserve much larger areas of the lot, including in this case, perhaps the prime agricultural soils, or at least at least a bigger chunk than you are now, as well as I would guess, and we would need to talk to some experts on this, that, you know, the prime forestry land and the areas that are closest to the stream and to the pond. So what you might end up doing is you might end up taking these 8 lots, we stayed with 8, and instead of using roughly 5 to 6 acres a lot, which comes to 40, 45 acres, but just for those lots, you could push them into a place where you might be using 15 acres for the 8 lots. And that is, I'm not sure what the total is, but that gives you the ability to preserve a lot. And furthermore, that they also become HOA land, they become group land. So you can have a pool, you can have a tennis court, if that's what you want to do. Although, again, that would also, we try to keep that away from the area of the habitat. And I don't know what they are, but the point is to use a lot less land. It's and typically what's called clustering. And those two concepts very much go together.
I understand.
Yeah, that's where, and that's, I think, when we sit down, that's where we're going with the new design.
Is the new zoning code the one that's been online for a while under draft status, or is it something different entirely?
We know what was passed.
You're talking about the new law? It was passed 2 weeks ago. And it's currently in Albany just to be,
He's asking where you can get it.
oh.
Because there's been a draft up there for a long time. Is that what it is, or is it totally different?
If you see draft, I got one from the town clerk, so you can go into the town clerk and ask her to send you,
I'll be telling where online,
sorry,
I'll be telling where online.
Send it away.
I know where it's online, but
on E-code?
yeah,
The town
Yeah.
clerk, the town clerk would be the expert on what's there and also what the town board passed. It may not be the.
Might not be the same thing.
Closer. Excuse me?
it may not be the same thing.
It may not. They may have made changes. Those changes would have been public as well, but I don't know what the link is that you've been looking at, but the town clerk will know what it is. And furthermore, if there's any difference, she can send you exactly what was passed, which is what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Rick, I just said, it was in the file, in our folder, there was a response from the highway department. And it just brought up a question because it said it was a response to, they said the highway superintendent had to take a look at 120 Whitfield Road. There's another applicant, and 481 Metacons. And I think that might be transposed number because I don't think we had anything. 41, because this lot is 418, correct?
481.
41. Okay, so, okay,
Did she make a sidewalk?
that's what I'm wondering about.
I'll call her tomorrow.
Is the letter from the highway superintendent, from Jessica?
Yes, from Jessica, yeah, just so,
Okay.
I may be wrong.
All right, so where we's at, Dave, if you want to give them, we'll take a brief break, if you want to give them what you've been using, the link, that's fine.
Okay.
All right,
At the
and
break,
then-
you mean?
We need to get back together next week. Because there are, in my mind, from what I've seen, significant changes, and we should be able to go through those with in detail. And then I think it's back to the drawing boards.
Short-term chairman, full environmental assessment form, part one's
Oh.
gotta be done.
Let me quickly go through the short-term things, yeah. A full EAF. If anybody knows the source of the water of the pond, we'd sure like to hear about that.
Do you know the depth of the pond, by the way?
Helena, let's not go,
Okay.
all right, let's not go there. Traffic study, we're gonna do the traffic study.
Gonna need the prime bank soils mapped.
At this point in time, I'll summarize everything, but I think there's some things you can definitely do right now or have to do. That's the full EAF. When we do get to the point of a new map, we've asked for this before, but we need a heat map in those areas that are steeply sloped. But you're not gonna need to do that until you have a new map. That's in black and white. Is it color?
Heat map, you want?
It's color?
It has to be in color.
Has to be
Got it.
color.
Color it is.
Right about.
In that checklist I sent you earlier.
Has to be color.
Technically gray is a color, but I'll make it whatever color you want.
So is white. It's a combination of all colors.
Yeah,
Right? So that's all I have in terms of things you can get started on right now.
At some point, we will need on our end, and perhaps they'll do it too, an assessment of the habitat values of the various different
Right.
types of habitats around there where they are. I presume that we're gonna need that, we need Bruce to weigh in on that, particularly aquatic, forestry, and.
That's a good point. So Matt, the new code speaks a lot about the environment and the value of the environment. So having somebody who's not a wetlands expert only or a tree expert, somebody who does ecological studies, and there are a couple of those firms around, to take a look at the whole site and determine the ecological value of different areas, the forested area, the steep sloped area, soil analysis, that'll be real helpful when we start getting into, you can't do this in this kind of area,
Yeah,
but we
but
have to
also-
identify where it is.
When they do their homework in a cluster in a particular place, hopefully they will be taking that into account. We may need less of that analysis if they've stayed away from the things that, become serious.
Okay? That's where he's at.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll go to the next project, Ridgefield.
You can't just create a piece of land and just file it. They're technically not supposed to accept it. The town with regulations of subdivision land, you have to see the chairman and and the chairman could file such a map without. This has happened before when, open spaces. So, conservation groups come in and they want to, they're gonna buy or pay as a gift. Okay, it's not something like that. So like, I don't even have. Still have to get.
Whenever I get-
That you had a what?
Still valid, they build it. Or the consumption. Yeah, it's been a tricky thing for some conservation groups.
I have a
They're based, in the early years of like oversized, they thought they could just buy it. But they learned the hard way, they become the planning.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
you can't just create, you can't just carve up land and sell it to each other.
Just seem like.
Short messages.
But, they'll do that here.
On Saturday.
Stuff that my mind just works differently than
Yeah, the thing is here, you gotta, I mean,
Okay, let's get back
we
together
gotta be a
again.
little honest. One of the compounds has all the water resources on it. They are up front.
Yeah.
Something saying that I don't touch it.
Good.
Yeah, but don't, you can't tweak them endless.
Abraham,
It's my concern.
you're next.
Right, I'm just saying they're already staying away from the pond. There's. I've looked at the maps and been there. Okay. There's a little slug.
Good evening, Jeff.
Conservation area.
And I'm sorry, the gentleman, you're
The
up.
rest of them,
Abraham, thank you.
guys, the rest of the maps are all for this application.
No, I'm not saying you did. I'm talking right to right.
1 second, Jeff.
You guys get stuff.
Oh.
Okay, we're waiting for Hans.
Sorry. I know, I didn't get him.
I can show you the one my best friend got on Friday.
All right, after.
Monster.
Good.
All right, well, Hans is here with Lost Days, so just give us a minute.
It's like a burning cat.
Don't beat it up, or else not, we'll have to stop taking.
So, you know what, let me get started. I'm sure Dave will be here in a second. So this is a project. If you know it as side of the. Could you all take your conversations outside so we can, or whatever you're good with up there. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This site, many of you know, is the old Villa Veritas site, which is sold to the gentleman in front of us, Abraham. To his left is Jeff Kaplan. Sorry, I've known you a long time, but it's like, Jeff. He is his attorney. Is your engineer joining us tonight? Okay, so there's been stops and starts with this project. I hope we're back on track with the project. And Dave is here, great. So I'm gonna let Dave go through, like he did with the other project, go through his prepared remarks. But Jeff, what I wanted to do with you is just confirm the three different uses or the three different definitions of what this place is going to be used for. The one from the CEO on code enforcement officer, the one that you sent me in an email or a letter rather some time ago, actually October 1st. And then the one that's on the application that was submitted many months ago from Abraham. So I don't know if all of you have had a chance to look at it, but the one, the CEO is actually the one that generates our activity in the planning board. And the CEO has said that the applicant is applying for a year-round resort. And Dave, I know you asked a question about should we call it a resort to something else. I'm going to circumvent that by saying, let's call it a resort rather than talking about, and we'll explain any other roads are still a roads. So it's a year-round resort, and he defined it as an educational facility as well. And that agreed, Jeff, with your letter to me from October 1st. It varied slightly, Abraham, from your application, section 9. So with your permission, if you could tell us that the CEO letter and your attorney's letter is what applies, and you were just being very summary here, then we're going to use what your attorney said it is and what the CEO said it is, not what you said it is. And I'm actually going to ask you to.
It's a little different than what the CEO said, I think.
Go ahead.
During the summer, it will be basically a school facility for teenagers,
Children.
12
We can
to,
call it camp.
yeah.
During the summer.
A summer camp, educational summer camp though. And during the winter, it's gonna be somewhat similar to the summer in that, except it'll be different groups of people coming up. In the Jewish religion, they call it Shabbatones, but basically it's gonna be a weekend event where people come up to pray and learn.
So that'd be in the winter.
That's the winter.
So that's not going to happen concurrently with the.
No.
Okay, that's all I want to.
Right.
Is there gonna be
During the
any-
summer, it's strictly gonna be just basically a educational / camp facility for, is it just man?
No, probably during the summer, it's gonna be boys. And during the year, it's sometimes boys, sometimes girls,
Two questions.
depends on the weekend.
First of all, the winter use, what you're calling it, what are the months we're talking about?
We're talking about basically October through May. May or even June,
So
yeah.
everything except the summer.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what you described, I want to make sure that this is right, is that winter use, which is really 8 or 9 months, is only on the weekends.
No, look, if somebody came up and said, we want to come in and we'll be here Wednesday to Sunday, or we're coming up Thursday night and then we're gonna leave on Monday, that would be it. It will not be a full-time You know, no one's coming up for 2 weeks. It's not like that type of a thing. It's basically a long weekend thing. And it could be hooked on to a Monday and Tuesday with a Friday, or it could be a Wednesday and
Oh,
Thursday.
Okay, on Tuesday, is the place empty?
Generally, yes,
Okay.
and Wednesday.
And the use that they're describing is it a camp,
It was planned by the CEO as a year-round resort
resort, okay.
and an educational facility. And
It's a little
Jeff's
different
letter,
than that. That's why when they say year-round resort, it's not really.
So,
If you're looking at the Hudson Valley Resort, that's not.
so
the
when people are
concept.
there on let's say Thursday or Friday through Sunday in the
Yeah.
winter,
All right,
there's also significant staff that are there to man to staff the resort.
Correct.
When the people go home and it's empty on Monday and Tuesday, are the staff still there or is it the place totally empty?
The staff are not living on the premises, meaning it depends what type of staff, maintenance and stuff like that, they live around here. They're coming in.
Do they show up during the day or is it just shut during? Oh, so 7 days a week, there's gonna be staff activity.
Maintenance people only
Okay,
throughout the week. Throughout the weekend, it's gonna be staff who's gonna come with the kids.
so during the week, it's maintenance and on the weekend,
Guy
it's
or
gonna
two.
be guests and also resort staff, hospitality staff.
Correct.
All right. Okay, so staff, okay.
okay, all right.
and a lot of the groups will bring a lot of their own supervision with them on the weekend. So when you have, again, I don't know exactly what the term is, but I grew up in that environment, which again was called Shabbatones, and you would, as a group, let's say, for example, the Jewish congregation, youth congregation in Ellenville would go to some sort of a resort for the weekend, and there you would do some learning, you'd play with the other kids, you'd go to synagogue on Saturday, and then you'd go home on Sunday or Monday.
Okay. I'm sorry for
No,
so many questions because we need to get a handle on the management structure.
Right.
For a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is that there's a lot of people here in this defined space. So when we talk about the resort, and ultimately, I guess we can make the same questions on the school. Physically, we're talking about having, this isn't like like other types of resorts where a family would come up and stay in one or two hotel types of rooms. These are more dormitory, this is a dormitory type of structure, right?
I go now.
The Pine Grove, what is also in the town of Rochester, they have basically exactly the same structure what I'm looking for. During the 2 months of summer, they are a camp, a girls' camp, and throughout the winter, they have weekends.
I get that, but I'm trying to understand what exactly physically what's happening. Like I said, in a resort that I would typically understand, people come up to stay on the lake and they stay in.
It's not like a hotel person checks in and checks out.
These are big dormitory rooms, right? So, and how many people are in a room?
4 people.
4 people in a room.
56 rooms, 4 people.
And are the people that come up for the resort, especially with children, is it a family that would come up? So the family is in charge of the children, or is there is it just the children come up for the resort and there's a manager and the managers are in charge of the children?
So some weekends will be families, some weekends, families are gonna come up but most of the winter, it's usually schools who 7th, 8th, 9th grade, they come out for a weekend and they have their staff with them.
So no parents, it's just children and whatever numbers and staff, and the staff are in the
Correct.
position of managing the children.
Correct.
That's what I'm.
Okay. All right, Dave, you want to go through the same way you did the other?
Okay, well, so going with Mr. Kaplan's most recent memo,
Dave, Jeff, do you have a copy of this, Jeff?
My most recent, what, your comments, yeah, I have them.
Okay,
and matching those to the permitted uses. These are, despite what all the previous memos say they're doing or not doing, it appears to be a private educational facility. which is a permitted use with, with site plan approval. Which they footnoted called summer only. Which your code makes no distinguishing standards about whether this be seasonal or not. And resort, which again, the applicant has said is weekends when the education facility is not in session, for the record.
Okay.
Which is also a special permit use.
So we're getting a special permit for the resort, for the educational.
No,
use?
both are special permit uses requiring have criteria for the special permit and criteria for the, and are required to get site plan approval, which has its own criteria. Okay, yep. So as we had an early discussion on, you're gonna have to define that. It's the seasonality of this is gonna have to be better defined. Because there'll be an element of approval if and when you ever get there, potentially.
Explain that a little bit more. What do you mean then?
Well-
I thought we defined it during the summer, July, August, September, it's gonna be educational facility at camp. And from October to the end of May, or the end of June, end of May, end of June,
Probably the June.
it's gonna be just catch as catch can resort with people coming up on different days, so.
Well, you're gonna have to, once you get there, if you get there. Are you gonna condition it being
Yes, that'll be a condition.
date X to date X?
Well, I think
Uh,
you have to be.
You don't have to do anything.
What do you recommend?
You'll need to decide if you're gonna do that or not, and then you're gonna have jurisdictional ability to do such thing. Because your current code makes no distinguishing element of seasonality of these uses. So you're gonna have to be careful, my advice to the board, that if you want to strictly limit these things to season, you're gonna have to come up with conditions that are legitimate that say so. Otherwise, you'll have approved a use that they can do anytime they want. Which is the more common feature. I mean, I'm trying to think of an applicant that since my time here, where you said you can only do that certain times of the year. You might have limited the number of times you can do it, but you're gonna have to think that through. And typically it's the applicant's responsibility to better explain the seasonality of this. Because even tonight, it seems fluid to me.
And also, I'm still a little confused about in the resort, which is the winter, especially if they come up without their parents, it sounds very similar to the school trips in the summer. I guess what comes down to is, for purposes of our doing an environmental review and ultimately permitting and conditions, we can just, especially if they're similar, I do want to drill down on that some more, maybe this isn't the right time for it. But we should just assume both uses will be permitted for, I mean, it's great that they're telling us what they're intending, although the edges of that are still pretty fuzzy. But the bottom line is, and picking up on Dave's comment, the best thing would be to permit both for the whole year. I mean,
I'm having problems distinguishing what the impact is of those two things. If one of them, say, the summer use is resulting in 220, say, roughly, residents or, people there. And it seems like there is the potential for 220 residents to be there in the winter too. I mean, they may not see that at the moment, but that seems to be the, worst case. And so do you permit for that? Because then that triggers all your requirements for fire and,
I think that's right. I think we just accept the fact that, first of all, I'm not sure that the difference in the season really matters that much in terms of the potential impact.
That's
Obviously, we can talk about that. And secondly, the edges are fuzzy. And thirdly, the actual uses appear to be kind of similar to each other.
Yeah, and also I'm sure that if someone came to you and said, I want to rent this place in the middle of winter for 2 weeks, you probably would say yes.
Probably not.
Well,
It's not really the.
Again, we should assume we're permitting both of them, either or for the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah,
whole
if
time.
we get too dicey in
That's
terms
why-
of seasons, it makes it difficult for the the CEO to, well, what do I do? I think they may be, they may not have complied with your seasonality numbers.
Yeah.
It just gets a little bit crazy. So I think we're assuming that it's
I
gonna
mean, you
be,
legitimately will have impact issues if it's seasonal versus year round. I mean, an obvious one is traffic can be substantially different.
They'll get, they'll
In
be
season.
getting, they'll be getting traffic in the winter as well, it'll just be a different.
Yeah, but
so-
the surrounding properties don't have similar traffic issues in the winter.
Okay, if that comes out, then that,
Or if you're, I'm making something up. If you're concerned about the scenic aspects of this, leaf on and leaf off makes a difference.
one,
Et cetera, et cetera,
I'm more
et
concerned
cetera.
about school buses on windy roads.
Correct.
When it's icy out.
But
That's
anyway.
gonna happen.
But anyway, the simple answer is, it's not the board's job to propose what they want to do on the property. The applicant needs to be crystal clear what they want to do and what time periods they want to do it. And while clearer, I think you're gonna have to specifically state that it's gonna be date X to date Y for this is defined as summer use, if that's what you propose to do. Otherwise, you're gonna have to treat this, as Mr. Gordon said, as a year-round use.
Yeah, because I mean, the bigger concern is they haven't carefully defined the uses. I'm still
Right.
unclear. The resort time, if it's gonna be more kids and families, for example, and the camp time, which is kids coming up for, so I don't, except maybe that in the winter, it's not gonna be during the week, where in the summer, it's during the summer camp is during the week, right?
Yeah, summer camp is
There's-
a summer residency.
There's a
basically.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know the weeks.
July and August,
So July,
that's
Yeah.
basically it. July and August.
So that's the
Yeah,
closest
I
thing.
would, when you're ready, I crystal clear define what you want to do.
Perfect.
And match it to the permitted uses.
okay.
To that-
Which instead of using garbled, you know.
Generalized.
With full respect, even your code enforcement officer didn't actually say. Use the proper phrase for permitted use.
Okay,
So we gotta, you're living in the world of permitted uses, okay?
Jennifer had a comment.
It's,
Dave, hold on.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Jen.
Could we ask for a written narrative that describes the use?
it's a requirement.
I
Yeah,
gave
he's-
you one already, but I'll just fill in some more blanks on
But
it, but it's.
something that's multi-page, that goes into detail and explains in the summer, this is the use, these are the hours. This is how the site will be used internally, externally, et cetera, and then in other times of year, this is how the site is proposed to be used. It's something that's lengthy, because I reviewed the documents and I still didn't entirely understand.
So.
So that would be
what I
helpful.
understand, I will probably adjust it, that it will be a resort all year round. But I would like to use it summer, July and August for a camp. If not, we'll get dates, it's
That's fine.
complicated.
And to write that out and explain what that means, because I don't know that we are all working off the same definition of resort and definition of camp. And if we have something written, then we can all review it and make sure that we have a common understanding of what you're asking us to approve. And I think that would be helpful.
Okay, Jeff, I think you can. Okay,
And further
Peter.
along with that, what would be helpful would be the number of people that you're expecting, anticipating in both summer with the camp and then resort in the winter.
It's much easier to tell you who's gonna be there during the summer than in the winter, because again, it's gonna be, there could be weeks when nobody's there.
Right.
And then there could be a few weeks where, again, it's basically gonna be a weekend event. And just to give you an example, and we have it a lot in Ellenville at Honest Haven. So a high school from the city will come up for a weekend, all right? The kids will come up, some of the teachers will come up and they'll oversee the kids there. There'll obviously be some staff from the facility, and then they go home on Sunday. And that's gonna be similar, it's gonna be probably a little more of a religious vein than what may be happening now at Honors Haven or what used to be the Fall View. But that's basically what's gonna be. So you may have a month where nobody's coming up. And then on the other hand, you may have a month where every weekend you're gonna have one of these groups. And the groups are gonna be in some ways comparable to what happens during the summer, except the summer, the kids are coming up for the summer. And during the winter, it's just gonna be basically a weekend resort or facility.
Is there gonna be any added development on the grounds in order to have?
Not any.
No
construction.
basketball courts, no,
None.
for the commercial, for the
There'll be no
recreational stuff?
construction on the site.
Again,
We're using all the existing facilities and that's it.
what would be helpful, I think, speaking for myself, but then I think for everybody else, would be the number of people that you're anticipating. I understand that it might be weeks that are dark, so to speak, but then there might be weeks that you're full up. And what does full up mean? How many people?
This sounds like,
Times four.
it sounds like it's the number of rooms, 56 times 4, which is.
Yeah.
20 or 20.
Maybe in your narrative to flesh it out, the size of the rooms, because some of the rooms were 13 by 13 and you're putting 4 people in there. That's not a lot of space. So
I provided the,
it's very hard to read the size of most of the rooms were between 13 by 13, 15 by 17. But if you could, in the narrative, explain that. That the rooms are, range from 13 by 15 to 17 by 17 and will accommodate 4 beds, etc. That would help us understand what you
If
want.
it's,
So does the increase in occupancy trigger changes? In terms of requirements, fire and safety and. so
Increase
on?
over what?
Increase in occupancy.
Over what?
Over what was there previously.
The rehab
Might need a
facility?
building.
Yeah, yeah.
Might need a building permit for sure.
Well,
I believe that the previous use had 1 person per room.
That's what
was
we
my
were told.
understanding.
And technically, they could probably continue the current previously approved use, right? I mean,
I don't
unless
know.
it was abandoned for a
I think Peter's
particular.
correct. Peter's correct. They had 1 person per room. There may have been some rooms where there were a bigger room where there were 2, but it was an alcohol rehabilitation center, and so typically it's 1 person.
So it's a huge, so it's a
It's a huge,
quadrupling,
it's a huge.
it's a quadrupling of the occupancy.
But if you read some of their documents from way back when, or you talk to them, there was over 100 people housed there, which would suggest that there was 2 per room.
But then also getting on with that, the increase in the occupancy, I think, and this is probably mentioned in your review as well. You want to take a look at water demand. There's more than 100 that,
We haven't even gotten there yet. Okay,
Just go.
but let's just go back to who gives the building permit, to Dave's point. So if it's permitted for 100 people currently and they go into 256, is that a Jerry? We don't get involved in that.
Well, the presumption is they would have to do some redevelopment or changes to the structure, which would trigger a building permit.
They're just gonna bring in bunk beds.
Yeah.
Well, okay, this is speculative at this point?
No,
Are you gonna do anything other than, in order to go from?
You have to have sanitary facilities, you have sewer and you have septic and water capacity issues, you got kitchen services, you've got if they're gonna, well, I thought we were having amongst the board discussion here. All those things trigger building permits at a
Okay.
minimum
Well,
for the town.
You know what, let's keep going through your stuff. I have a lot of,
I just want to,
Go ahead.
Right.
we're gonna be giving site plan approval and special use permits.
Right.
So that will justify the building permit.
Because they've requested it, yes, of course.
keep going with your,
It doesn't meet the locational criteria for county referral, so your county planning board doesn't need to get this. It is in an agricultural district, so we're gonna need an agricultural data statement. I'm recommending you get a full environmental assessment form, part 1. There are a number of features on this property, the larger property.
I have the phase 1 already.
Well, you gave us a short form, you know what we're talking about? You need to do the longer form. And it populates out much more detail. We can get, that'll help the board with decision-making and assessment of impacts. It's a useful tool. It may be arguable that the new code will require you to do it anyway. There are a number of substantive issues. It was brought up by, I forgot, Helena or Peter or someone. The board's gonna need a map of the total property with a narrative explanation of what's gonna go on the whole property. If that says nothing, but you're gonna redevelop the existing buildings, you need to say that in a narrative and show that on a map.
what we have, Abraham, is just what you're doing in the existing buildings. There's a lot more property around there. In a site plan, we need to see the entire property. If you're doing nothing, then you need to say that in the narrative, and you need to mark the map, you know. No impact, no impact, no change, whatever.
You could do a dash line around the area of the redevelopment, which is just an area around the existing buildings and access and parking. And say you're doing nothing outside of that. But ultimately, the board's gonna have to, your approval is gonna have to relate to the whole property.
Right.
And a narrative is, was said earlier that relates to that. There's, let's see here.
What page you on, Dave? 5?
I'm doing the highlighted version. Does that work?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, the floor plans, just a pet peeve. Documents submitted by an applicant are a public record for review. If they don't say who prepared them and they're not dated, they're useless. So all documents must list who have a title, the name of who made it, prepared it, and a date. And the floor plans, there are multiple different floor plans that use the exact same title. And don't explain what the difference is. So each sheet needs to be titled differently. You do have the preparer and have a date on when it was prepared. Because it's ultimately a record that'll be referred to in your approvals. Yes, those.
Yeah.
So if you look at some of those, the titles are unchanged, even though what's showing on the maps changes. So they need to be distinguished. Let's see here. You got a memo from the planning board on October 27th. Still to be received is the board still needs the fire evacuation plan, the quote unquote detailed bus route, which could be explained depending on what buses are going to be used and not used. An explanation of traffic anticipated, including buses and van service, and well and septic approval from Ulster County Department of Health.
And that gets to, if I can, that gets to Dave's point about at what point do you begin to worry about the number of people? If it was only planned for 100, now you have 256, that would come out in your well, your septic plan.
Yeah.
Does it get approved for that higher number?
Right.
So we need to see both the application as well as the permit and what it was applied for and what it was permitted for. In addition to the kitchen, because you're going to serve food, right? So there needs to be a permit from the Department of Health on the kitchen. Kitchen.
Well, yes, given their uses, there are a series of health department permits that
Right.
you'll need to see.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't take so.
On that note, I just want to mention.
Which
that-
by the way, the full environmental assessment form has a section where you list the permits required from different agencies. So that's a useful tool when you fill out that fuller form, the board knows what other permits are needed.
I was thinking, depending on the water use, a water
could be.
withdrawal permit on something this large.
It
If
doesn't-
the
It's possible
capacity
they need
is
a
over
state
100,000 gallons, then they would need to have a DEC.
It's 100,000 gallons, right?
Yeah,
That's 200 people.
Yeah, I don't
know, I'm just, with food, et cetera, but that's something that needs.
You have a unique population. I mean, having dealt with this, and having been involved in Orange County for a long time, I've seen where that population has gone to places and can evidence that their water use is different than the general population.
Okay,
So,
just,
you need to think about that. What's your water use gonna be? Because it could trigger what she's saying, a state permit requirement. Other agency referrals, the engineer is gonna have to look at some of this. They're redeveloping existing buildings. There's a bunch of utility and service issues. I don't know. For example, if the stormwater erosion control system's adequate currently, and does it need to be tweaked
Well,
or
that
improved?
If there's no physical development, why would that come into play?
I don't know, because the application doesn't, they say that here.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. It's, you're not gonna tweak the parking lot, you're not gonna do anything. You're not gonna, it's not gonna physically do anything. Well, then we need to know that and see that on a map. So it'll be referred to town engineer, fire district and the highway superintendent, because those are town roads. You're required to have a field visit because of this nature of this and public hearing when ready.
So I just want to, thanks, Dave. I just want to come back to a couple of things. which you didn't mention, you did mention the emergency response, the fire plan, I call the fire safety plan. But it's also, it could be part of it, but it's also a facility management plan. And that's where somebody was going with, so who's in charge? When somebody's there, is it just people come, they check in and then they're in charge of the place themselves? Or is there a whole management plan? So for example, if the fire trucks or ambulance or somebody has to go up there, who do they talk to? Who do they call? Is it somebody from the area? So a complete facility
Even
plan
that.
and a complete safety plan as to how the kids are being, or the people are being evacuated. I presume in terms of fire code, they need entrance and exit in each one of these buildings. And it needs to be reviewed by someone who knows what they're reviewing.
I have a question on that because I actually want to amplify that a little bit. You're going from a building that had an occupancy, at least apparently permitted, of one person per room to 4 people per room, right? And we don't know whether they ever got it to 2, but we're going to 4 now. Also, it sounds like during much of this time, the vast majority of those people in those rooms are minors, children. So I guess what it comes down to for me is not only do they have a plan, but who is managing that facility on an hour-to-hour basis in case they have to evacuate, for example? Who communicates it, who coordinates it, who makes sure that the people that need to get out instead of getting hurt? And I would just defer to somebody that knows a lot more about fire safety and things like that, because when I look at the potential environmental impacts here, that is the one that just it keeps on hitting me as we go from 50 people up to 200 plus people and they're minors. And they may not be all that used to the facility themselves, and they may not be used to this particular condition. So what do you think about that?
I agree. It's a major concern that I have, and that I have seen there, in my role.
Well, what would we look for in terms of satisfying ourselves?
So you'd have to, I think it'd be worth checking with the building department. I'm not sure, and I don't know this off the top of my head, what sort of egress is required per room. The number of people per room is a big concern, but then the egress from the room, do they have to have a window exit? Do they have to be, obviously there are things like there have to be marked doors, emergency exits and things like that, but then is there a requirement for egress per room? And particularly second floor rooms? I don't
Second
know.
floor.
No, because some of these rooms are on.
And what
second
about the
floor.
direction? What about like what do we need in order to manage that situation?
That would be the building department. Building department fire inspection. They would have code requirements.
Would they be willing to help us on the seeker review for that?
I would imagine they would, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a big concern I have, and Abraham knows that I've been there a few times.
Yeah.
My big concern with this is that it is essentially doubling or quadrupling the population there, and
the minors.
How that is managed and how that is trained, because they're not people like in a school, a typical regular school, they do fire drills, they know where the exits are, they know a procedure.
And there's a
They have an
teacher,
assembly
in every room
There's a
that
teacher in
has
every
to
room that
direct
does that.
what they're doing.
We're not talking about this here because there isn't going to be a teacher in every room, because it's a dormitory type thing. And so that's the kind of stuff that I have real concerns about, is purely from a
And plus,
safety standpoint.
depending on what level of staff they have,
Yeah.
it sounds like there could be different adult supervision each different week with the different kids, et cetera. And so we just need to know that there is some management structure that can deal with a situation like this,
Yeah.
whatever, all the levels that it takes.
Yeah.
I think as part of the narrative, it's important to have not just the narrative about the people in the rooms, but also the staffing for that. So kitchen staff and all those auxiliary staff who may be on campus. As we're talking about, we're talking about 224 people occupying those rooms, but then you have support people as well on top of that. And that's going to impact parking as well as, all these other environmental things that we're doing. So that should be an important part of the narrative as well.
Abraham, does the state require you to have certain number of people certified to manage this place while there's kids there or people there? Is there a state?
State requirement.
There's no-
State requirement on it, no.
Not on the resort, anyway.
What about on the camp?
On the camp, I have a safety plan submitted to the county. to Ulster County. And they have a structure, how they want principal, all type of.
So we need to see that
people. Yeah, I submitted to them in the middle of the summer.
to them, but we need to see it as well.
Correct, I will
Okay.
be there. Regarding the fire,
Who did you submit it to in Ulster County?
Laura Bell. Laura Bell.
What department?
Board of Health.
Board of Health.
Yeah. She oversees, she issued a temporary residence, a permit for the place. She issued it for 257 people.
For this facility.
Correct. According to their stuff. Regarding the fire, there was a inspection from the fire department, from the building department, I forgot his name.
Okay, so just so we're clear, this board is gonna need to see your safety plan, your management plan, whoever you submitted it to, we need to see it. And then beyond that, we need to get the permits, the applications to the Board of Health for water, septic, kitchen, whatever else. We need to see the actual application and we need to see the permits. That will tell us what they're permitting it for. So they're gonna figure out, do you have enough septic for 50 people or 500 people? So I need to see what you apply for and I need to see what you're permitted for. Is that clear?
Correct, I have Bachman.
I can't hear you.
Bachman.
Middenbach and Eggers.
Bachman,
Oh, okay,
they're working on the septic and the water.
okay.
They have the old records, they have everything. They just have to submit it to the county to get stamped and.
And we're gonna need to see that
Once,
as well.
you know, once it's stamped,
Okay.
he said the beginning of December, it's gonna be stamped by the county and I will submit it to you guys, that for you.
Good, Dave.
The conversation suddenly slid into this is calling this a camp. I will point out that the new code has significant changes regulating camps.
Okay.
So, this is the confusion with the use. It's currently classified as a private education facility by the code enforcement officer,
Yeah.
not a camp. They're two different things with different rules in your code. So we're gonna have to pin this down.
Did those definitions change in the new
They
code?
came, the camp,
Well, we may need a new, we may
the
need.
camp the camp definitions change completely.
Well, then we may need a new interpretation from the CEO.
So Dave, similar to the last application. This Dave, me, Jeff, and one or two members of the board are gonna need to sit down and go over the new code with you and the impacts it's gonna have. I didn't read that far, Dave, that they changed the camp definition. But, so we gotta reflect on what the new one is, and that has to be part of it, of what you put together, what you submit to us. Any other?
I would only note, I mean, I don't know, driven by that neighborhood over the years. When was the previous use approved? Is there a file?
Bill of Veritas?
I don't know
Jasmine,
what
do you know if there's a file that we have on Villa Veritas? Off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, I
It's years ago.
It goes back, I'm gonna say it goes back 35, 40 years.
Oh, that long?
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say that would help you define what the current, what the previous use's capacity was.
We can find out from the CEO if there's I don't know. That's a long time ago.
You know, instead of speculating there was one person per unit or two people per unit or.
Yeah.
There would be a record of an approval, one would hope. And they're not supposed to exceed that.
Right.
Till that approval changes.
Okay,
Dave, my notes from the last time they were here indicated that the prior use was one person per room. But I can't tell you if it was the applicant that said that.
Okay.
we need to see if we can find some.
Yeah,
paper.
exactly. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's go around. Dave, I'm gonna go around the room. So Dave,
I'm with you, man. Yeah.
you good? Jennifer?
I want to read the narrative and understand the proposed action before I make further comment.
Okay. Jeff, the more is better than narrative. Okay, Helena?
Basically everything I said, as far as impacts, septic, water withdrawal, all of that. And fire safety and a plan. I concur with what Pete says. That is really the key, I believe. The change of use, it's my understanding, it's a wood frame building, fire suppression systems, that we really need to be assured that if this is an allowable use, it is safe for these minors.
Peter, just, you're right, they are wood frame. What, who approves, I mean, if it was brick, there'd be one set of fire suppression, you know, if it's wood, it's something different, if it's thatch, it's something different. Who approves that?
Building department.
It's gonna be the building department again, okay, and the standards are,
They
Fire
follow
code
fire
standards.
codes, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Just to reiterate, my concern is the number, it all depends, for me, it depends on the number of people in the occupancy. That's gonna affect the water, septic, health department, other concerns, as well as fire and occupancy per room. And so I think all those things are gonna.
it all ties together.
It's totally connected in my mind, whether it's summer with, you know, 9th to 12th grade boys and winter with adults in a way. So it's just, that's the big thing, is stuff that keeps me awake at night, is this.
And Hans, before we get to you, everybody saw the letter from the fire department, right? That was
Yes.
included in the file.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My comment is also based on this, so it appears that the fire department came a couple of times out there, and there were hundreds of people. Is it being used right now? Are you operating a
used in the
camp, or
summer.
what are you doing right now?
It was used in the summer.
Okay, so it's a summer camp.
Could we get a copy of that letter from the fire department? I don't think we ever saw that.
I can email it to you tomorrow.
I'm sorry?
I can email it tomorrow.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, yeah,
Thanks.
okay.
So it's a permitted summer camp.
Was that an
think they had
allowable
a-
use?
It's
Yeah,
an
the chief
educational, it
returns
was,
first.
it was typed as an educational facility,
So it's being continually used.
No,
basically.
code enforcement information.
educational facility,
That's the typing of what they were using it for last summer, not what they're proposing.
is a camp. No, it's still, according to Jeff's letter and the CEO, our CEO, private educational facility during the summer months and a resort during the weekends when it's not.
That's the
being used.
proposal.
Proposed.
Right.
That's not, he was asking about what.
Oh,
Yeah.
what it was used. During the summer, it was probably being used.
Currently, that's my question.
I don't think anybody's there currently.
This past summer.
This past summer,
Summer,
it
exactly.
may have been used erroneously.
That's where I wanted to go.
That's,
Okay, just a couple of other things. Lighting, I think we saw a lighting plan, so that's gonna go to our engineer. They have to go over it. Landscaping, just a comment.
It's not enough detail
Well, they've done enough
to
detail
refer it to the engineer yet.
on the lighting.
No. You don't have
It
any,
looked like the lumens were there.
you have no spec sheets on the fixtures.
That's true.
You've got minimal locational information about where they're gonna be placed.
It's not, like nothing new comes up.
Yeah, but these are-
You're not putting
You're not
any
gonna
new
put
stuff
any
in?
lights up.
Nothing new comes up. No construction on that place. There's
Well,
no
nothing new
construction in
made-
The whole area at this point. It might come up in a year.
You need to say this in your narrative.
No,
So there's no change in the lighting at all?
no, there's poles, all the whole
Yeah.
parking lot, there's all, it's according to the code, I think, shining down.
No, we're basically, yeah.
Yeah,
You're not adding any additional lights
No.
around the building or anywhere?
All right, put that in the narrative.
pretty light up.
The landscaping plan. I'll give you some recommendations. It's not gonna work. This stuff's gonna be dead in a year or two. That you're proposing. One of them is susceptible to a disease that's spreading. It's a beech disease and they're proposing beech trees. Forget about it. And the other one is, unless there's water there, they'll dry up in about 3 months and they'll all be dead. So I'll give you some names. Whoever your landscape person is, you can share it with them and I suggest you change it. Okay, just to save you some money and some aggravation. And by the way, with the landscape, we asked for a separate escrow for the landscape that's equal to 125% of what it costs to buy, put in, and to replace the trees. So I'll go into that with you when we meet to talk about the new code. We can go through some of these other things. Noise. no additional noise. You're not gonna be sounding,
No outside.
reveille for breakfast or reveille for
No.
lunch, nothing like that, no
Everything's
loudspeakers, nothing.
No loudspeakers over there, no.
Okay, that'll be one of the conditions, because if there is, we gotta,
Any outdoor music?
No.
okay. And
Yeah, so you're gonna, just to build on that a little bit,
Go
having
ahead.
been to some similar facilities, it's pretty common that there's amplification for moving the kids' groups from one place to another at different times. I'm familiar with Chattahoochee Lake and the camp there where they play music all the time. If you say there's no amplification, that means in your narrative, and it becomes a condition of approval, you can't amplify anything.
That's right.
You can't just all of a sudden decide you're gonna play outdoor music and make announcements. It would be better to think through what you actually think you're gonna need to do in common practice, rather than come back, a few months later and say, oh geez, I realize I gotta do this and that. Think it through.
Yeah, more generally, when what Dave says, is if you say, this isn't gonna happen, that's not gonna happen, there's a very good chance that's gonna be a condition of your site plan or your special use permit, which means that if it does happen, then the situation would be that the CEO, the building inspector, would possibly come out and be doing enforcement. And just to avoid that at this stage, tell us, if you think you might do it, tell us that and we'll load it in, we'll figure it out. But if you say no, it's gonna be no.
It's one building basically interconnected maybe with other two buildings. It's not like some camps,
But we're talking about,
resort has a lot of buildings, so they have loudspeakers that basically,
but what, many camps or educational facilities in the summer, for example, you might have a campfire with people playing instruments and sometimes amplification. If you have 200 people, it may be amplified, and that's, that's a very natural thing to do. Yeah, at a lake or a campfire or whatever else, or whatever facilities may want to have outdoor meals and things like that. So if you're going to do things that could be affecting neighbors that people will see, if you tell us, we can write the proper permit and do the proper studies. If you don't, then we're just gonna, you're gonna have to deal with that down the road.
And something Dave just said, around safety. There's a lake there, and the other Dave mentioned it, but you're gonna have a fence around the lake,
Cool.
around the pool, all those things have to be accounted for too. So that's part of the safety plan. Okay, anybody else? So there's a lot of work that has to be done. Jeff, we'll be in touch with you. Well, two things. We'll be in touch with you next week to get together. To sit down and go through the new code and out of the new code, what changes you're gonna have to make. Can we get together? Could you give Jasmine, give her a call, have the secretary give her a call, get some dates for a site visit? And we want to go up there. The whole board wants to go up and see it. We would like you to give us the tour, show us everything that you've been speaking about, the buildings, the lake, what you're gonna be doing, where things are gonna be, where the parking is gonna be. Here's the lights, we're not changing them. So real dog and pony. So why don't you just call Jasmine and make arrangements, give her a couple of dates, and then she'll let us know when Phil will be there. You got a question?
no, I might, right now it's empty already for 3 months. And there might be a health facility, a health company who are looking to bring up back for drug rehabilitation. Till we pass this, or maybe
I'm lost. Are you saying that
I'm
it's
saying,
empty right now, but you're gonna be putting people in there for a couple of months?
No,
No, he's saying it's been empty for a couple of months, but it may be
Correct.
people have seen.
it's it's not a non-for-profit, it's a for-profit company. And they're looking maybe to get, their use currently is for drug rehabilitation center. So it's not only me, I'm one of the guys, there's a few members on the company, on the LLC. Well, they're looking maybe to get in a drug rehabilitation center, what is current use for it,
All right, so hang on.
till it gets approved.
So what I'm hearing you saying is you may either change the use, change the ownership, sell out.
No, no.
Include another interest.
No. We're gonna rent it out for medical facility, a medical company who does drug rehabilitation. So they will, I'm gonna be a landlord from them. Are they gonna come in? And do the-
What's your time frame for doing it?
We have discussions already for the last 2 months with them. They are a Brooklyn-based company, but they have facilities in Monticello and in Liberty. They are a big company.
What's their name?
My name?
No, their names, the company.
Harbor Medical Center.
Hava?
Harbor Medical.
Okay.
Well, if you're gonna use if you're gonna use the existing permit. And you're not going beyond that permit in terms of numbers of people and usage and all that, you deal with the building inspector.
Chair, we have 2 questions on the existing permit. Number one is whether it's lapsed because it hasn't been used in 2 years. And the second, we're talking about a special use permit now, not a site plan approval.
Right.
And secondly, we have to clarify whether that can be transferred to a different operator.
That's why I have you as counsel.
Right, the council needs to figure that out.
We need to figure that out. And you
So
need to
I
tell.
just want to point that out to these folks that it's not clear that a special use permit for another organization, how long have they been gone for? How long has Villa Veritas been gone for?
Now, let's see, not even a year.
Okay. So so Villa Veritas may still have an SUP, but we need to figure out whether it can be.
Will you figure that out first?
I'll do that.
According to the health department, they have no issue, whatever.
Wait.
According to them.
The health department may not have an issue. We may have an issue in terms of the use. The health department could say, yeah, you can do whatever.
Understood, but currently it's approved for that, so.
Well, what our attorney just said, he wants to make sure when Villa Veritas was last there and running it as a rehab facility. The best way to do that is for him to talk to the guys inside and the ladies inside. And then the second thing he's gonna do to see whether or not whatever permit they have can be transferred to another company.
You and I will discuss that. I'm just raising the point. I don't know either way.
Fair point.
But if it was a site plan approval or subdivision, it doesn't matter. That runs with the land. It's just building. But and a special use permit is more about how a facility is being used, and so it may well be transferable, but we just need to figure out. I need to verify that. We'll do that very, very quickly. What's your time frame on getting people up?
From them, I'm still discussing it with
So
the,
it's not day to day yet.
we don't have a time frame at this point.
Okay, so we have a week to figure this out then.
I'll
Through the holiday.
I'll give you some free advice. Won't charge for it. I'm not a lawyer. Listen to your lawyer
I'm listening.
and he'll keep you out of trouble. And he'll talk to this lawyer to make
I
sure,
got a list of other people I would get.
to make sure that we don't get in trouble. So just,
I understand, it's
Okay.
just, like I said, it's a for-profit company and they're looking.
Okay.
Whatever, we'll discuss
no,
that.
you have a great lawyer there. So, and we have a great lawyer here. I don't want you to blow yourself up by doing something out of course. That's the
No, I
best way to put it.
understand, but
Okay, so just
what I understand, I discussed it with the CEO a long time ago. Yeah,
this guy, CEO,
Jerry?
Jerry?
Yeah,
Bringing the new group up.
that was when we purchased it. He told me I can only use it at this point, only for.
Okay.
Rehab.
He
facility.
promised better than I could.
I believe that
But you'll-
was, that's why I
I will
went that route.
definitely.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
No, I'll communicate.
We're still scheduling the site visit though, right?
Yes.
Because I think that's what you were getting at, is that it might be, there might be residents there for the site
But
visit.
that's the only,
So sooner rather than later,
Yeah.
Give some.
we should try and
You're
move as
gonna give
quickly as
dates for
possible.
Jasmine.
Yeah.
And then.
Give me a phone call or an email at some point, either tomorrow or Wednesday.
And I'll compile all the things we said that you're gonna need.
yeah,
Some things might change, but I'll get you the letter summarizing what we said here in the next day or two. I'll send it to your attorney, he can get it to your friend.
so I got letters before from the board here, from the chairman. I don't.
Well, now you're gonna
They're
get,
Very narrative.
I always-
very-
now you're gonna get
I
a
like
longer
that.
letter with real details.
I got the last detail letter, everything was.
Our objective is not to make it hard on you, it's for you to do it right, and for us to do it right. I don't want anybody getting hurt.
No.
Okay, that's basically it.
Understand the fire department chief. I know, I met him myself or 3 or 4 times maybe about the summer.
You had 2 or 3 fires. No, just kidding.
Some fires, but yes.
Okay. All right, I think we're good. Jeff, do you have any questions?
Appreciate your courtesy and your time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Happy
Thank
holidays.
you, Abraham. Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys and ladies, we have, we're gonna move on to some other topics. And, try to get you out of here by 9 o'clock. And we do have to go into an executive session to talk about a lawsuit. So Jasmine, you wanna talk about the calendar for next year?
I'll be good.
Okay, guys. You pull out this packet out from under your agendas.
Okay.
The calendar column explanation page. You want me to read the whole thing?
No, just tell them, just explain what you did here. You don't have to go through every day.
So you can keep these, they're for you. This is our new updated calendar for next year. The first column we had to add because it was creating a lot of confusion for code enforcement and applicants, and they were dropping the applications off to code enforcement on the date that code enforcement was supposed to be submitting their determination letter to us. And then getting mad at them and me for them not then being on that month's agenda. Cause then they had less than a week to get me all of their materials. So we had to add an extra column, so now a lot of our dates for them are gonna land on our meeting dates. But that's applicant issues, and then the only ones that's gonna affect the board is our planning board meetings and our workshop meeting dates. Those are the dates that you guys will have to be here, and that things will be. Have to be loaded into Google Drive by to be on that agenda.
Any questions on that? Okay, brief discussion on what we use workshop meetings for. So, it might be more than a brief discussion. So, Dave, I'm looking for you and Dave to come up with, here are the things you probably want to do in a workshop. What I would like to do, is everything but a public hearing. I'd like to be able to get the board to vote, for example, on escrow, if we hadn't said escrow. The board to vote on giving this off to our engineer or getting somebody to work on something. I'd like to be able to even do decisions. So let's suppose at the first meeting of the month, we have a real easy to do. We have the public hearing and close the public hearing. I don't like doing decisions the same night as the public hearing because it tells the public, well, we weren't gonna make any changes because of the public hearing anyway, so here's your decision. I don't want to do that because we might get some changes. But if it's real easy, I want to be able to get it redone or done. And vote on it at the workshop meeting instead of waiting another month and holding the applicant up, as long as there's no major issues. So I just look for you for some guidance in writing to say, here are the things you could do in a workshop meeting. If you do this, you need approval from the town board because they say you can't do it, all that kind of stuff. I don't think there's anything that they've said we can't do at a workshop. It's just by practice at the workshop was just a workshop that pretty much went the way it did today. We had a lot of interface with the clients because we had a lot to talk about. Normally it's just they listen, we talk and we go home. So initial comments or comments from the board. Dave, your initial take?
Me?
Yeah.
You can, a workshop is a public, as far as the law is concerned, and I have not checked the code, and I don't think there is, assuming that there's nothing in the code. The law, it just distinguishes between public meetings and not, if you have a quorum, for example. So the idea of having a workshop is something that the board itself designed, and many boards do, so you have different types of meetings. So it creates, your own procedures and also the expectations of the public. The one thing you don't want to do here more than anything else is to sandbag the public. So, if the public expects you to not, for example, vote on a resolution, vote to let's say a neg deck, in a workshop, they expect you to do that in a regular meeting, and you start doing workshops, they need to know about it one way or another, because otherwise you just run into trouble. It's not illegal because it's a public meeting. As long as you have a quorum, you have to comply with the open meetings law. So the workshop is really for the board's benefit to design the types of procedures that you think help do your job better. The way Mark was doing it was the workshop was essentially not a workshop, it was just a second meeting if you wanted it, and it was all kind of the same thing, just. And you can do, that's perfectly fine, as long as everybody understands that's what you're doing. If you want to do something else, like to reserve these for a deeper dive into this. You know, and you say, we're not gonna take any votes, so you're telling the public, basically, you don't have to worry about coming here. You just need to stick to that, so you don't sandbag them.
Okay, all right. So let me think about
And
something.
so what happened tonight is
Yeah,
fine.
I just note the new code. As at least, I found 2 references to pre-application conferences.
So thing we offer.
So conservation design options, you're recommended to all pre-application
But
conferences
that's not, with the, is that what the chair,
with the planning board.
We have to establish a
so
procedure.
it's an
for
open
that.
meeting then?
Well, if the planning board can't meet and do business without being a public meeting.
So before, in other words, so what Dave's, that's all, I mean, usually the pre-application conference is something done with the CEO.
No,
I
I mean, I've been to I've been to a few thousand
All right.
meetings.
That's how
I,
we
uh,
have been doing it though.
In my experience in this region, I was a planning board member in Shangam for a while too, but went to a lot of others. The workshop came up culturally, in those crazy years when meetings were going to 1 a.m. And it was like, we can't do this anymore. So we need a second meeting and we'll clean the chitter chatter and the discussion out and hold a workshop where no decisions will be made. No act, what do you call it? No action will be
Well,
taken?
that's what's neat, that's an executive, those are the
Right.
state rules for executive session.
Right.
That's right.
So you're having a conversation with people. They could come in with, geez, I've been at some of these things where they're literally coming in with a scratch piece of paper and an idea in their head. Now, some jurisdictions have modified that so that they now have 2 full meetings once a month.
Yeah, I
And
don't want- I
there's
don't wanna do that.
there's no distinguishing features between the 2 meetings.
Okay,
Others have, what Dave's talking about, it's not a quorum of the board meets with staff and 1 or 2 members of the board. Applicants can request, typically they pay $100, $200 just to keep it honorable. To avoid no-shows and people just wasting your time.
we do that now. And
Yeah,
There is a
We're not-
fee, I forget what
We're
the
not
fee is.
charging
We're
a
not?
fee. We have not charged a fee since before I got hired.
All right, so we're gonna have to change.
so you're
that.
gonna have to address, if you're doing conservation design option, you're gonna have to come up, I propose the workshop could be a place for this pre-application
Okay,
meeting with applicants on conservation design.
all
It
right.
would be one role.
I could see the use of establishing escrow in the workshop meeting. Is that permitted? Because that's not a decision,
I
right? It's a-
haven't looked that hard.
We have them with Aaron
We-
for escrow.
You're making you have to decide if you want to take action in a workshop or not. You're taking actions. Passing a resolution to establish an escrow.
But if you have a situation with an applicant who wants to, you're saying, who need to study this or get a consultant or whatever, want to recommend that. Do they have to wait until a later meeting or for that to happen? Because
Right now they do,
Yeah,
because we don't set an escrow. Well, first of all, we weren't setting escrow correctly under whatever process we had before. We're supposed to vote on it. And
Yeah.
I think last week I caught most of them, we voted on it, but we never did that in workshop.
Right.
Jasmine just told me that there's some new procedures for escrow
okay.
that Aaron wants to meet about, so we'll have to
Okay,
wait until we
okay.
sort that out.
But I also want to point out that there's nothing wrong with saying, we're not gonna pass any resolutions in the workshop other than something procedural like an escrow. It's not like you're doing an egg deck.
Right,
You're just doing,
it's allocating money.
you can
Right.
make whatever rules you want to make your life easier, and for that matter, the public's life easier. And if, the 2 choices are, if a resolution becomes important in a workshop, you can say, we're not gonna do this, we're just gonna wait 2 weeks until
Right.
we meet, which would be for like a neg deck or something like that, or a deck, I'm saying neg deck, could be a pos deck, could be anything, could be an approval. Or you could say, for certain simple things, we're gonna be able, like an escrow, or declaring lead agency. It's just not a super controversial thing, right? But you need to pass a resolution. May as well do it now to get the ball rolling. Or you can say, we're not gonna do any, you can do whatever
Right.
you want.
I mean, I just see the use of streamlining the process and making it better for the applicants. If we can save time in the process by doing certain things that are not impactful decisions, such as
Procedural stuff.
like
And
setting it.
we could
Yeah,
list some.
so, but I guess there's stuff that needs to be discussed.
Let me give it some thought and I'll come back with a list of things that we can do. Yeah, I don't I don't want to hoodwink the public.
No, I agree. I think we have to be totally upfront about what we're doing, with making major decisions. I think my feeling is that we should limit that to a proper full public board
Yeah.
meeting, you know, and not because people can miss that, you know.
Right. They get the wrong impression that way.
Yeah.
Workshops could be training for training.
Yeah.
Educational training
Yeah.
events.
We have.
It
used
could be
them
for discussing policy, like you're reviewing the code, a proposed code change.
like we will be doing shortly.
That kind of thing.
Okay, the next item, discussing, discussion of training. I asked 3 people, sent a note to Jennifer, Dave, and Peter to work with Jasmine on some training material that, Erin had forwarded to me, some stuff that Jasmine had, and just come up with here's the training that we think this board needs for the rest of the year. I have some definite ideas, but if you guys could put some meat to it and actually schedule it, something every month for the next 12 months. I mean, I might be exaggerating. Even if it's only a half hour, but to get formal training and things like ethics and open meetings laws and whatever else is out there, seeker. An easy to do method of doing seeker, kind of, you know, the short version of seeker instead of the long version of seeker. I knew that would.
30 minutes on
So you told me out of a job?
No, don't worry about that.
What does seeker stand for?
The number of times I meet with you for hours. So whatever you guys can come would be great, and I'd just like to have it scheduled if we could for the whole year, and everybody kind of knows, all right, here's the basic stuff that's gonna help us understand what the hell's going on in terms of process and difference between a planning board and ZBA, what the planning can do, what the planning board could do, what the town board could do, what the difference, what the gap is between the two of them, all that stuff. So,
Just as a point of information, I went through the process of supervisor and now I'm sending because we are a member, the town is a member of the New York Planning Federation. And I did get one of those bundle links today.
okay,
It took a couple days to get it, but I just said I'm interested in bundle A. And I got a bunch of links to that for training,
okay.
which seems like a great resource for a lot of different training.
Okay. So I'm gonna look to you guys to work with Jasmine, we just set this all up, so there's some organization around it. It was very much catch as catch can in the past. Dave, my next,
Also a combination of all the new code changes and the new rules. That would be great.
Like, the chairman's asked me to try to summarize do a summary of highlights.
That's exactly what
I think I'll do that. You can't shorthand, you're gonna have to read it.
How many pages is the new?
Oh, it's so.
Is it like 300 or is it like?
Yeah.
It's more like 100.
Okay.
But there's also subdivision regulations, which I think are 70. So between the two, it's 200.
Can we get links to it? Or-
Oh, yeah, if you go to the. If you go,
The one that
it took
passes?
me a while to figure this out, so I'm very proud. I have to share this. If you go to E code, there's a left-hand column with a series of icons and
Mhm.
folders. You go to public documents, click on that. There's a subfolder called legislation. And they're in there, even though it says there's a folder called new laws where you think it would be. Because the description, because the description of the new laws says exactly what these things are. They're actually under public documents legislation.
Okay,
They'll migrate over as soon as the state certifies that they're in effect to the actual code.
so the final is actually there, it's just.
No,
wherever it
you
is.
have to look for the versions that say
There's multiple
for
versions.
public hearing.
Can you
Because there are
share
a lot
the
of
link?
earlier versions still in there.
Yeah, there's a link that we can share with the board for that. for
Yeah.
that
Can
very
someone
page.
email it to me and I can mass it to everyone?
That would be very
That
nice.
sounds
Yeah,
a lot
that would be
simpler.
great.
if you have it,
Bring it right now, Jen.
Thank you.
okay, so we'll get it out to you.
I'll
I
send
have
it
it
over
also.
before we
I'm
leave
sorry.
tonight. You'll have it.
And it's
before
not
we
easier
leave.
than what.
Can take
Look
two
at it
seconds.
tonight. You will.
If you want to look at it tonight, you go to E code and look at that side margin.
So
Click on what,
the timeframes for this is, according to Erin, it was submitted to the Albany sometime early last week. And my understanding what Albany does with it is they just, I'm not saying rubber stamp it, but it gets stamped and filed by the Secretary of State, and then it's official. So the minute that it's official, and I find out about it, I'll let everybody else know. If you find out somehow or another, let me know. But, and so at that point, and we've been talking about, there are quite a number of changes I was shocked at the number of changes for Meta, but
Yeah, they also changed the zoning maps. And the supervisor told me this evening that the only way we can find out how they changed is she's gonna give me a list of tax parcels. Which is a little frustrating. Cause apparently there's no edited red line version of the zoning map that shows the changes.
Dave, could I impose on you to try something? Call Dennis, what's his name? Doyle, and say, hey, we need a big map of the new stuff.
Do you have
They
a big wall
publish-
map? or-
I have a big map of the current code.
I have the old one.
All right, we have the old one and they're in color. I mean, they're big. It's like, yo,
Mine's laminated.
right? And that was done by the county. Ask him if he's planning on doing something for the new code.
Okay.
All right, and if not,
Oh, the new zoning map is in that folder on E-code. What's impossible to do without spending a lot of time is
Is
figure out
all-
where it changed.
oh, all right.
But the Aaron said she's getting from the county a list of parcels.
All right,
That
well, that's a start, but let's
that
see
have
if,
changed zoning districts.
see if Dennis Doyle can get us
Okay.
at least a new one.
And then also the scheduled uses appendix C as has things that are crossed through.
I was able to print that out.
Right.
Oh, here it is. So it's this. It's this thing, and it's when you, the link that Peter's sending you. This is the list of, for example, lot development standards. The new names of what the lots are gonna be called, what the zoning areas are gonna be called, and then the standards like the setbacks, the acreage and all that. And then, and this is,
Yeah.
looks complicated. But it talks about the different uses in the first column, and then it tells you what zones it's allowed in. So it's going the opposite of what you have
Yeah.
today, which is, here's the zone and here are the uses. So this gives the uses and tells you where you could find that use.
Those are all the
It's
same.
also in that thing.
That's
So for example,
appendix C.
commercial events, if you go to commercial events in that thing, you'll see all crosses, no more commercial events. So it's kind of.
Jasmine, you're sending it out, so.
All right,
On that.
Ew. Site, all right, we talked about scheduling the two site plans. We got the one for Meta. I skipped over SHPO.
I've reached out to SHPO.
Tell them what the issue is there.
Well, the issue is, what do we have to refer and when?
So
So-
right
so
now,
we-
when we tell them refer to SHPO.
State Historic Preservation Office.
They complain, the applicants complain, well, I never hear from them. And you're holding up the approval of my application. I'm saying, well, call them.
Well, I've been doing that. That's an entertaining bit. They're all working remotely.
Yeah.
Quote unquote, as an office staffer told me again today. And they apologize profusely, just keep trying. So over time, my experience has been that SHPO doesn't always reply. And they may now be replying. Apparently they do better than they used to. So Jasmine, you got something?
We've got one in the last 3 months.
An actual reply.
So again,
So the issue
Yeah.
becomes, there are certain trigger mechanisms through this environmental review seeker process that will highlight that there's a cultural resource, as they're generically called, of potential concern. And an ideal means of putting that to rest is having the State Historic Preservation Office weigh in, whether it's archaeological or historic. But the reliability of that is unclear, and I don't think they're ever prepared to get every 2-lot subdivision that happens to be near archaeological sensitive area. Because think of how many you do, and then I forgot the number, there's 1,600 municipalities in New York State. So figure they're gonna get a few thousand of these every week, every month. They're not gonna respond to them all.
Do they have to respond or?
No, I have found nowhere that you even have to refer it.
If I can
The
add,
state agencies New York City may have to refer it.
So-
But state agencies, there's a state historic preservation law that says state agency decisions are referable. But there's no, never found anything or heard anything that says a municipality has to refer it.
No, it's not that, it's that in my experience, and my jobs were usually bigger sites, but every time I've ever referred to SHPO, they've said to do the desktop analysis. I don't know that even if it's not inside a sensitive
Right.
area, because it's like agricultural, or there was a house on it 20 years ago, and they want you to, like, I don't think I've ever done a referral where they just said, go ahead and do what you were gonna do. They always wanted something, which is.
What I'm trying to get clarity on is you have this unique circumstance that I wasn't totally tuned into. Where for better or worse, in the early aughts, you got a whole bunch of stone farmhouses listed on the National Register of Historic Places, like a lot of them.
Meaning this town or?
This
Yeah.
town has a bunch of farmhouses on the National Register of Historic Places. And Seeker has trigger mechanisms related to features that are
I'm not ready.
listed on or eligible for the National Register of Historic Places.
It's
And
type one.
yeah, well, it's also a bunch of other things. It, it's an impact. You gotta measure. And SHPO is ideally, because the stone, sometimes the house is listed and sometimes the whole farmstead's listed. And you don't know
Are they
that.
responding to those?
We just had a legal case where we were supposed to refer it.
And we didn't refer it.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't lose the case for us,
It
but
wasn't that
we
we
got,
didn't refer, it was that we
Got our hands
didn't
slapped.
take into account the next day.
I thought it said, well,
Let's see,
anyway.
let's see what he said.
What the chairman's
yet.
been advocating is that we have applicants contact SHPO.
so I just need to know, should I hold things up? If SHPO doesn't respond, is it a matter of magnitude? Is it, who cares? I do
We add
care,
it
but
to
I
our
don't know what to
decision
do
that
if
it was
an
referred.
applicant says, I've been waiting for 3 months, you won't give me my,
Dave,
you won't give me my approval because I'm waiting for SHPO and they won't respond. It's like, I don't know what to tell you, bro.
I thought they
can we
had to.
put something in the
respond
condition
within 30 days.
or in the resolution that we refer to?
If someone wants to help me, I can't even find the legal reference that you even have to refer.
Oh, okay.
Let alone there's language that says they have to respond.
Because when you, when you apply as
The
a
state
home-
law is about state agencies.
when you apply as a homeowner for tax credits.
Well, that's a whole different matter,
Yeah.
because you,
They,
You're-
they do 30 days.
right. Right, because you proactively sought listing on the National Register or state of historic places. Or
Just
your,
well, I'm
or your
thinking about,
previous
you know,
owner
like the
did.
Hamlet of Ackord is
So let's try to wrap this up, just as an aside, if I'm not mistaken, the court case that Dave's gonna talk about. We were actually cited by the judge, and the judge referred to some New York State section of the code. That we should have done what we were supposed to do as defined by the code, to your point. But what I need, counselor, is what do I do?
All right. First of
I
all-
have two calls in to the archaeological unit and the historic preservation
Okay.
unit. Hopefully they'll give me fairly simple guidance for the board on
Okay.
what's the best thing to do.
All right,
Okay.
here's my advice. First of all, in the court case, the particular.
Hold it.
You wanna talk about that then?
We're going to the court case, we need to go into executive session.
Okay,
Okay.
finish everything else. we're done.
Transcription of minutes, then we'll go in the exec session.
Oh,
We'll
you
talk
wanted
about
to
that
talk about
real
that?
quick.
So
So you don't want to do any more?
my
on-
generation
on-
has come out with this
historic
really cool
referral.
thing called Minutes AI. Every video that we live stream on YouTube, I have paid for their subscription for the year. I can upload the link into the website and they fully transcribe everything we discuss. From the moment I hit start till the end.
Right.
So we can get very detailed minutes, or I can continue doing the minutes the way I have been doing them.
So I owe you my review of the last
Yes,
minutes.
you have
I gotta
to
get that.
add your notes and.
I
send
don't
it back.
want super detailed, but I want to preserve this thing, those things for legal reasons.
Yes,
Okay.
and
that's
they
good.
will be preserved in the office email and I can save them as a PDF and upload it to Google Drive.
Okay,
If
Sounds
that
good.
is something that Aaron is interested in.
so let's go into executive session.
Just a question about that, how, we check the accuracy of this, or do we know? I mean, just because I haven't used a few transcription services over the years.
I didn't check the accuracy.
I read through a little bit. It was
Pretty good.
pretty close.
Yeah, it's gonna be better.
That's great.
Yeah. I
As long as we have
had
good
bad
dictation,
experiences with auto.
I haven't had an issue yet. That's great.
So I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session at 9:50,
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
motion, second, on second, all in favor?
8:55.
Excuse me,
Hey,
it's
hey,
8:50.
Did I say 9?
Yeah,
Yeah.
8:50. I don't want to wait here an